Hey everyone, welcome back to the PAC-South podcast, and we are now 1 week into the NCAA tournament. March Madness in full swing. Not the most upsets in round one, but the couple that we did get pretty large, almost in a foreshadowing kind of way. Right behind Pat, the Florida Gator helmet. Obviously, the Gators go down in the round of 32. That was very shocking. I didn't have them in my Final Four, but I definitely thought that the Gators were going to have a good run. They're one of the better teams from conference play on in the country. Um, and then obviously the other big one, you could say, North Carolina losing after having a 19-point lead to the Rams of VCU. And very quickly after it is announced that Hubert Davis no longer the head coach in Chapel Hill. Obviously, there's a incredibly large expectation for the Tar Heel basketball program. Do we kind of think this was a bit abrupt, though? They've been moving in the right direction. They had a very good team this year. We had some injuries at the end. Yes, you have a 19-point lead and you lose that in March Madness. But looking at the full picture, was this knee jerk?
I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna say no because I feel like arguably Hubert Davis could have been fired after last season. Um, because like he's just consistently, I feel like, overachieved when you look at the recruiting resources, the NIL resources, and of course the brand that North Carolina is. His first year kind of caught lightning in a bottle, made that crazy run to the Final Four and the national title game as fairly high seed. That wasn't exactly on a lot of people's radars that UNC was going to make that run. Um, and then since then, it's kind of been like disappointment after disappointment almost. Like literally the year after, you come in ranked number one in the country, unanimous, don't even make the NCAA tournament. Year after that, you bounce back, made the Sweet 16. Then last year, they were kind of a borderline team. Last four in, blow out San Diego State in that game, but then lose to Ole Miss in the first round. You're gone. Lose to VCU again this year, like you mentioned. And officially, I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin. Like, yes, Caleb Wilson broke his hand, and that was a huge loss for them, given the immense talent that he was. But I don't know, like there were some cracks even when Caleb Wilson was healthy. Like after that big Duke win, they were prone to some letdown losses, which kind of killed that momentum. Wilson gets injured, and then the season really comes off the rails from that point forward. So I think it was time that Hubert Davis was fired. Um, Now the question becomes, how does this impact, the carousel, the coaching landscape? But I know we're going to get into that in a few minutes.
Yeah, it's I feel this is kind of like with college football, how this last year was just so crazy. You had a coach go, then another coach, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's a big one. Okay,
Yeah.
now things are really playing. I would say this is kind of our big one, and there's borderline a second one out there. There's a lot of conflicting reports in Bill Self in Kansas. It's been kind of coming out that he's done. Bill Self, a couple hours before we started recording, came out and said, nope, that's not true. Like, I don't know where these reports are coming from. It would be very interesting to see if we did have a job like Kansas come open to rival North Carolina this cycle. I think that would make a lot of people think, especially the big candidates. Programs like Providence probably are very happy right now.
Yeah.
They got their guy and they got him in early, so he's already locked in. But coaches that may kind of be on bubble or negotiations, like you have Todd Golden down in Florida. Nate Oates has come up as a potential mover at Alabama. And those are definitely not the largest jobs, but still, it would be a big job taking a slightly smaller, but albeit still big programs coach. So you're really going to have it moving and trickling it all the way down. Be very interesting to see, and also what that would do for kind of the going rate of these coaches. If you have
Yeah.
two programs really just kind of throwing money, would really change the landscape of coaches. for North Carolina, at least right now, is there anyone who stands out to you as if UNC is going to win this hire, they got to get this guy?
Hmm. Oh man, that's tough. I think it depends on what North Carolina wants in their head coach. Like, do they want somebody who's, I'm not going to say young, but at least like on the younger side, like a Todd Golden, who's got experience coaching in this era, who's got experience navigating NIL, or do they want a guy whose name has been thrown around a little bit, to my surprise, slightly, in Billy Donovan, who's been out of the college ranks for a while in the NBA at OKC first. Now he's obviously with the Bulls. But try to poach a guy like that back to college where he's definitely had much more success than he has as an NBA coach. Um, I don't know. I feel like it kind of depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're North Carolina, because the chances of them poaching like another Blue Bloods coach are pretty slim. And granted, I feel like most Blue Bloods kind of have their coaches locked in, except for now we might have two in this cycle right here. Um, I don't know. I feel like if they can get Golden or Oates, that would be a good hire. I wouldn't be super shocked if Dusty May's name comes up, the coach at Michigan, see if they can't lure him away, and say, like, this is the basketball culture at North Carolina. Like, you will truly become a college basketball icon winning here. Where at Michigan, yes, it's a historic program with success, winning one national championship, but football is always going to come first there. So I don't know. Maybe they'll take a swing there and try and lure a guy who's got tremendous portal success in Dusty May away from the Michigan job.
Yeah, I think that would actually be a good hire and one that I don't think would ruffle too many large feathers. Yes, a big job in Michigan would open up. However, I don't really feel that that's going to get the revolving door really spinning as bad as some of these other ones could. But yeah, very interesting. We'll be watching that. I'm sure that UNC will probably move before the end of the tournament in finding their guy. So interesting to follow that story in the next couple weeks. We'll shift over to the PAC-South Conference now, and the conferences are the women and men's basketball pretty much called race. South Carolina women obviously advancing to the Sweet 16 after blowout wins in the round of 64 and 32 against Southern and Southern Cal. So the Gamecocks look to be on their way to their first PAC-South championship. Can't say the same, though, for the baseball team. The baseball team has completely flipped script. Obviously, this past weekend, mid-series, they fired their head coach in Paul Maneri. Got a year and a half or so of his tenure. Never got going. He kind of came in with a we can win now mentality. They 32 and 30 last year. I believe this year when he was fired, they were 12 and 11 at the time. Yeah. Really just a bad display for a program that was typically the only good team on that campus. So the Gamecocks now have to, one, see what their interim and Monty Lee can do, and two, probably go into the cycle this summer and find a head coach. One of the bigger things of note, other PAC-South Conference member, Florida, you go back a couple years, you had Coach Sullivan down at Florida who was ready to leave. South Carolina was trying to get him. They found out. Florida actually gave him an extension and a little bit more money to stay. So interesting where those two programs would be, because Florida obviously is still a marquee program in the country. Oh, yeah. South Carolina, now a bottom team in the SEC. A team who has made a stride in their conference and also in ours, Notre Dame. Notre Dame was 9th just last week in our conference. They had a great series sweep of Clemson this past weekend, along with a midweek win. Next thing you know, the Fighting Irish are from 9th to 4th, and they are only behind our Florida schools in the baseball rankings. Pat, this Notre Dame team, did we expect this for the Diamond Irish?
I don't think we expected, let's say, like this level of performance. Um, I mean, Notre Dame's been a good team. I'll say, like, more recent history, they have made a few runs to the College World Series, not getting out of like regional or super regional play, but at least making the bracket.
Hmm.
Um, but to see them have this kind of success to sweep a team like Clemson was quite surprising. I think the interesting thing though will be how this team plays away from Indiana, right? I think they're undefeated at home, and then I want to say they're like 7-3 or 7-5, something like that, on the road, and like fairly close to 500 at neutral sites. So I think it'll be interesting to see, like how this team does in conference play. But they did play UCF really close earlier in the year. Um, Hung around kind of with LSU. So maybe it's not like a huge shock that they're playing this well. Um, but I don't think that I would have predicted them to be top three before the season started.
Yeah. Would we say that this team, I mean, obviously the Florida schools, Florida State, and UCF, very good at baseball and have built up their programs in UCF in the last few years over a long period of time. They're very much main fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
But Notre Dame being right there in the fourth is a weird name. Can we see them truly compete in the ACC, or is this just an early flash in the pan for conference play?
I feel like this weekend will be a pretty good indicator. They've got North Carolina this weekend, and I believe NC State the weekend after. So these next 2 weekends will really show us, like, is this a true, I'll say, top tier ACC team? They did take 2 out of 3 off of Duke, who's a pretty good team this year. Um, But again, is it just kind of getting off to a hot start that then fizzles? Or is this something that we can expect out of Notre Dame baseball this year? I think it can only be beneficial for the ACC to have them be successful. It just adds to the depth of the conference. Aside from teams like Louisville, North Carolina, NC State, Clemson, Florida State, Miami. Like, you have those top teams, but some of the others are kind of hit or miss and not really like baseball focused schools. Um, but adding success from Notre Dame in there, I feel like can only help the conference in terms of trying to get more bids for the CWS and things of that nature.
No doubt. Now, that's a team that went from bottom to top. Now we're going to hit a team that went from top to bottom for our conference so far this year, and that's New Mexico. They were right there, either first or tied for first for the first couple weeks. Obviously, one of the last remaining undefeated teams in the country. Now it cannot be said the same. They have fallen from first down to eighth in the PAC-South. It's been a really rough go of it lately, especially ever since the Tarleton State series. They have not been able to get a groove going. Um, as they head further into Mountain West play, do you think that New Mexico will be able to bounce back, or do you think that we're going to be kind of sitting at a 500 Lobo now?
I don't know. I feel like they did have like a tougher opening series, opening matchup, whatever you want to say, in Mountain West play with San Jose State, kind of like right off the bat. And that's usually like one of the better Mountain West baseball programs. So I feel like they can settle in a little bit here. It's not like the Mountain West is a conference like the SEC or the ACC where they're, running 6, 7, 8 teams deep.
Sure.
I feel like a momentum shifter for them could be really that upcoming game. I think it's in like 2 weeks against New Mexico State. They lost to New Mexico State earlier in the year, and that's what kind of started that skid for them. So maybe beating them in the reverse game or the reverse fixture um, can kind of turn momentum in the opposite direction, right? Get them feeling good for conference play. I believe that's like right before they play UNLV and San Diego State. So again, two really good Mountain West baseball programs. Can that turn it around, or does that kind of just add fuel to the fire and quicken? I'll say their decline in our
Yeah,
standings. Right?
the descent to the cellar.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna say probably the latter. Unfortunately, because I thought it was a really cool story seeing New Mexico put up runs like crazy at the beginning of the year, win those games with a lot of consistency that I think was surprising a lot of people, but it seems like they're slowly kind of starting to regress back towards the mean a little bit and back towards preseason expectations.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate. Obviously, if you have listened to the podcast for a while, we were very high on New Mexico football this past
Yeah.
fall. So it was very exciting to see how the baseball team just came out the gates, scorching it up. I bought in immediately. I was saying this is going to be a top 3 finisher in the PAC-South. Looking at the team now, their current form, and kind of what's ahead based on what other teams have, I don't see a path um, really that they can do that. I mean, I think it would be a true miracle for them to do it. I think it would probably involve them having to make a trip to Omaha. And I just don't think that's in the cards for the Lobos. So unfortunate. It's a great start to the season. Hopefully they can put up some respectable numbers in Mountain West play. But as for the PAC-South, I think unfortunately they are kind of done on their run. Moving over to men's basketball now. Well, we mentioned it at the start, and it kind of solidified the rest of our standings. Florida losing in the round of 32. They were kind of the only team left alive, especially St. Louis and UCF losing early as well. Iowa State's kind of still in the fold, but really to only pass Florida now, which then leaves Duke as our 2026 men's basketball PAC-South champions. Duke is currently 2-0 for conference championships, unless there is something crazy that happens on the women's side of things. Technically, Duke is in second place for the women's championship. So South Carolina, just I guess falls on their face in the next round. I think if South Carolina wins the Elite Eight, they mathematically win it. But if Duke wins the Natty and South Carolina loses, it'll be close.
Never know. Yeah.
It'll be close. And Duke is currently 5th in baseball. So, I mean, I don't think we see a perfect sweep by any means, but they're currently sweeping. Duke Athletics really, really having a great year this year. Football, they really just ran away with it. Obviously, winning the ACC in kind of miraculous fashion, the way that tiebreaker worked out. Not a bad team. Manny Diaz did a great job with them. But, I mean, kind of a different story, same ending with the men's basketball team here. The Blue Devils have just been on fire throughout the year. They had the most quad 1 games of anyone in the country, and they won the highest percent, obviously. That's why they're the number 1 overall seed. Still who I'm going with for my national champion. But nonetheless, a big congratulations to Duke for winning a second now championship, first in men's basketball. Pat, just a few hours ago, we got our bracket for the Frozen Four. We haven't really dived into it too much, and obviously games will be beginning here soon. What is your first initial gut feeling about the bracket and kind of what you see at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting draw. Fairly balanced. Obviously, like the Frozen Four is a much smaller tournament than the NCAA basketball tournament. So a lot less teams in there, not as many, like, we'll say, Cinderella opportunities. But I feel like it's a fairly balanced bracket. I think Michigan's probably going to be the favorite to win the national championship this year. I think UConn against Michigan State should be a really, really fun first round matchup. And then assuming they beat Quinnipiac, that whole region that Providence is in, where it's Providence, Quinnipiac, North Dakota, and Merrimack, right? So you've got
Merrimack.
Hockey East champion, Hockey East regular season champion, a really good Quinnipiac team that's been a Frozen Four mainstay, and then of course North Dakota, who's always got a good program. I think that'll be a really fun region, or I don't know if they do regions for the Frozen Four, but area, for fans to keep their eyes on, especially if we get a Providence versus Merrimack game. You know, hockey's regular season champ versus tournament champ. I think that'll be a fun matchup. But I don't know. I feel like Michigan's probably going to be a lot of people's favorites going in.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, number one seed in the tournament. I will say though, I kind of have the gut feeling that that is the region of death. If you unfortunately remove Bentley from it, I mean, you have Michigan, Penn State, and Minnesota Duluth in that region. I think um, any of those three could easily come out of that region and go to the actual Frozen Four. I think that that is the one to watch early in the tournament, and I really like the North Dakota team. I think that that is kind of my front runner right now, personally, for who's going to win it all. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, very early on, and hands up. Haven't watched as much hockey this year, but yeah, I think that that Michigan region is actually deceptively hard for what it kind of should be.
Yeah.
I think that would be kind of a bloodbath over there. All right. From the Frozen Four to the regular basketball Final Four. We made our predictions last week of who we think. I came out unscathed, surprising, considering how my picks normally go. Um, Obviously, I'm not going to change any of my picks because I'm just going to keep riding it. But I will give you my upset alerts for men's and women's. Women's, obviously, I still have UConn, UCLA, Louisville, and then I picked South Carolina to be my national champion. I think Louisville is my upset team here. Obviously, they're in the same what do you call it?
Region.
Same region as Texas. Yes, that would then mean that if Texas does upset Louisville, I would have all one seeds. However, historically speaking, a women's tournament would be more likely to have the all one seeds versus the men's tournament. Um, the the caliber of the top teams on the women's side are just so good. They are able to put down a full bench, and a lot of times, like you'll see some of the early matchups. Like I think it was South Carolina and LSU. Their round of 64 games, they both won by, gosh, I want to say it was like 75 or 80 points, somewhere in that range. It was an incredible margin. And there's nothing against the other teams. It just shows really how strong and how deep these top teams are in women's basketball as it continues to grow. Like we've seen it spread a little bit more often, seen a little bit of upsets. Speaking of an upset, Virginia over Iowa. That was a crazy game. But I digress. I think Louisville is my upset alert team on the women's side to Texas. And then over on the men's side, Illinois, Iowa State, Duke is my national champion, and then Arizona is my upset alert team.
Ooh, okay.
I have really enjoyed what Arizona has done on the court. I think that they have been a very consistent team, kind of in a way being very fundamental in their play. However, I fear that that style is kind of coming. It will end up being a. I'm losing all my words. They're going to have a slip up game. They're going to have a slip up game where it's just like Murphy's Law in a way. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a very good team, but I don't think that, for reasons unbeknownst to me, I think that Arizona is my upset team, Pat.
Okay. I'm gonna follow suit with you in the case of not changing my Final Four. I too got out unscathed this weekend. I'll say I still technically have a majority of my Elite Eight teams, but some bolder picks, I guess you could say, did cut me out of three of my Elite Eight squads. I had Gonzaga, Vandy, and I actually had Virginia upsetting Iowa State. And they lost to Tennessee, so that did not work out for me. But still got five left, so I'm keeping my Final Four the way it was. which is UConn, Houston, Arizona, and Michigan. I still am sticking with Arizona as my national champion just because I really believe that the Big 12 was head and shoulders the best conference this year for basketball. Um, Big 10 curse is always real. It never seems like Big 10 teams can get over that, final line and actually win the national championship since Michigan State 20 plus years ago. So I'm sticking with that. I still feel pretty good about it. I like the way Arizona plays basketball, and I feel like they match up really well against Arkansas. Um, Purdue being this hot is a little bit worrying. I'm not going to lie, as they were, the preseason number one team, had all those expectations, but I do believe that Arizona is, I'll say, like the safest left in terms of trusting. Um, their ability to win a national championship. I will say Duke is probably the one seed I feel the least confident about now that Florida's already out. I feel like St. John's is going to give them a good game. I don't think they'll win, but I do feel like regardless of who wins the UConn Michigan State game, I think that team will beat Duke without Caleb Foster. Um,
Hey,
I don't know.
which
I just
every
don't.
every year Duke wins a national title, they beat St. John's. So it sounds like the
True,
national title's this weekend.
true. Um, I don't know. The Duke just worries me, and their like reliance on Cam Boozer right now without Caleb Foster being healthy. Of course, Isaiah Evans has really stepped up without Caleb Foster playing, but him and Ngongba both not being 100%. I know Ngongba's back at this point, but against a guy like Reed from UConn, do you trust him to stay out of foul trouble? Things like that kind of worry me there. On the women's side, I went with think I did all one seeds. If I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I actually didn't fill out a women's bracket, so I'm kind of just going off the vibes of what I felt like I said last week. Um, so I'm gonna go.
Oh
I know I
boy.
said UConn was my national champion. I'm
This
sticking
guy.
with that. They're head and shoulders above the rest of the field, in my opinion. Um, UConn, South Carolina, I don't think I picked UCLA actually. I feel like I picked LSU. So I'm going to go with LSU and Texas are going to be my final four. Again, purely vibes here. Um, we're just
We are
keep checking in
professional,
on the women's side.
professional, semi-professional analysts and journalists here at PacSouth. Um, okay, who? So of those teams that you like to get to the Final Four, who do you think has the toughest path?
On the women's side, I'd say probably LSU because I don't know if they can get past UCLA. I mean, UCLA is a very, very good team this year. There's a reason they were ranked between 2 and 3 for most of the season.
Sure.
Um, so I don't know. It seems like ever since that national championship run with Angel Reese, Kim Mulkey's kind of struggled in high pressure scenarios and games with her team. It seems like they can't really like replicate that success or like reach that level, especially against South Carolina. But also, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in that Duke game? Yes, LSU rebounds extremely well, but maybe Duke can get them out of their rhythm and force them into some mistakes. Um, as somebody who's watched some South Carolina basketball games in the past, I do know Mylasia Fulwiley is prone to playing a little bit too fast sometimes in critical
Yeah.
scenarios. So is that going to come back to bite LSU? Maybe, maybe not. But they're definitely the team I feel least confident in. I think Texas is playing really good basketball right now. Of course, Louisville does present a challenge, or Michigan, to them. I'm not really worried about them against Kentucky, though. Um,
Yeah.
I'm a bit shocked at how big the line is for the South Carolina Oklahoma game. I think it's like 16 or 17 points in South Carolina's favor, even though
It is.
Oklahoma, I know is in Oklahoma, but that was one of 3 losses for South Carolina this year. So I thought it would at least be somewhat tighter of a line.
Yes, I agree. That was a bit shocking. I think maybe it's factoring in the they lost once, they're not going to lose it again
Yeah.
kind of situation. And South Carolina looks very good
Very
right
good.
now. We knew that round of 64 would probably go similar to how it did. However, I don't think that we saw them beating Southern Cal by 45 points.
Yeah.
I thought that was very remarkable, and that was a Southern Cal team that went wire to wire with a Clemson team, which we could have had a second round matchup of a rivalry. So,
Yeah.
very surprising the Gamecocks did that. However, it shows what kind of good form they are in, and obviously UConn in probably even better form with how they are going about things. So, I think that if we do get that Final Four matchup in UConn and South Carolina, that we could be in for a treat.
Yeah.
And I do think that the winner of that game is probably the national champion still.
I would agree with that, regardless of who comes out of that one.
Yeah, I think that those two teams, I mean, that's how it's been the last kind of 5 years in a way.
Yeah.
Obviously, LSU did get the national championship the one season, but I mean, those two programs have been amazing and kind of in lockstep for the
Yeah.
last little bit. If one team doesn't win it, the other team does typically. So, all right, more basketball, and we have hockey this weekend. Baseball obviously still going around, but we're playing for national titles right now. So we will watch all of that. Oh, NIT this weekend. Who's your winner?
I'll go New Mexico. We like the Lobos here.
I'm also going Lobos. That's partly why I asked the question. All right. Bows up. We will see y'all next week. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. We will see you next time.